That's a new voice. I'm not used to hearing it telling me it's recording. Here we go. Oh, I forgot the most important thing. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Okay, man, Jim. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys.
Yes, sir.
I brought Jim Baxa with me today. Is it how do you say it?
Baxa.
Baxa.
Right.
I said it right. Jim Baxa. So I don't know Jim real well, and but I'm. This is an excuse for me to get to know Jim better. Jim and I have been involved in the sanctuary city vote here in Lubbock with which a lot of you guys kind of followed some of that conversation. Jim more so. I think you were the guy that originally pushed to file the ordinance, right? So you've been here from the inception of this, the brainchild. You've been part of the brain. Who all was there from the very start, pushing this before it even became something that I could help out with?
Yeah. So I guess I'll back up even further than that, and I'll say I met Mark Lee Dixon probably 6 years ago now.
Okay, I met him when he came. But he was in Lubbock during this deal, right?
Yes.
I shook his hand.
Yeah. So I met him in Austin maybe 6 years ago. We were both there testifying on some pro-life bills that were not very good, and saying, enough of these pro-life bills. Let's stop regulating abortion. Let's outlaw abortion entirely. And so we were looking for an abolitionist bill.
Keep talking. I got to check something real quick.
So Mark and I met there, and we kept in contact throughout the years. And when Wascom, Texas passed the ordinance to become sanctuary city, and that happened because...
Was Wascom the first one?
Wascom was the first, yeah. And that happened because a Louisiana abortion clinic in Shreveport, Louisiana was feeling like they were at risk to lose their license to practice because the Democrat governor in Louisiana was putting some regulation bills in that was going to affect them.
Okay.
And they said, well, we'll just move over to Wascom, Texas, right over across the border on I-20. And so they passed the ordinance. I called Mark up. I said, hey, great work. Love to see that. You kept them out of town. And I said, I'd love to do it in Lubbock, but sadly, our city council is pro-abortion.
Okay.
So knew that wouldn't happen. So fast forward, Planned Parenthood announces they're coming to West Texas. And they said that they're going to come to 2 places. And we figured, well, Lubbock's got to be one of them because Lubbock's the biggest non-El Paso city out there.
And we've got the big,
big university.
The big university.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you this real quick. For people that are new to what we're talking about, Lubbock, the city that I live in, recently passed a sanctuary city ordinance which outlawed abortion within city limits. And I'm going to talk to Jim more about how that's enforced and what all that means exactly, because I'm not 100% on that. But one question I had for you was about Planned Parenthood's arrival in Lubbock. I had heard a couple years ago that somebody had offered $10 million to Planned Parenthood for them to come. And I remember telling my friend, Tom, right, who's the co-host of the show, and both co-hosts, I told him if that happens, I'm going to have to get involved. I've never lived in a city that had a Planned Parenthood or been around a place with clinics to, but I hadn't really heard anything after that. Then all of a sudden, a couple of years after I'd heard those rumors, here they are. Did that end up? Did somebody make good on that, or is Planned Parenthood's arrival unrelated to the $10 million that was offered?
No, you're exactly right. That was their money, and they ended up opening a clinic in El Paso and in Lubbock. Okay,
so was that? I mean, was the $10 million from a private donor, or was that from
an anonymous donor who didn't want his name to be put out there? And I imagine that there's some record somewhere that has his name out there, but I never did find out who it was.
But that's true.
Yeah.
So that's okay, verified. I wondered if their arrival was related to that rumor or not. So okay. So anyway, back to what was the name of the city? Wataska? Would you say?
Wascom. So East Texas was the very first city.
So they've passed it. How long after they passed it did you actually start talking to Mark Dixon about it?
Almost immediately. I forget the exact timeline, but we talked very quickly after that, and I gave him encouragement for doing that, and said I'd love to do it in Lubbock.
Okay,
but we don't have the council for it, and it wasn't an urgent thing because we didn't have an abortion clinic at the time,
right?
And I said, I'm going to work on replacing our city council because I know that they're liberals, I know that they're not pro-life, and once we can replace some of those, let's do this. And he said, let me know, I'll be ready. So
how long from that conversation to when you actually, so
that was 2019.
Okay.
And here we are in 2021, May of 2021. So it's almost 2 years now.
So how long did you know Planned Parenthood was actually going to have a location here before you got to work trying to get this ordinance passed?
Yeah, so they didn't announce until 2020.
Okay.
That they were going to.
So that's when we knew for sure. Was that in the middle of the COVID stuff or right before?
Yeah, it was in the middle of COVID. Yeah, exactly. Middle of COVID. And so at that point, it was kind of like, okay, now we need to do this.
Okay, yeah.
So
now it was serious.
So I sat down with my senator, Senator Charles Perry.
Okay.
He's a good pro-life senator. And I said to him, we need to, outlaw abortion, and he had heard about this same thing happening. And by this point, there was a number of cities, I forget the exact number by that point, that had outlawed abortion in their city. They're all small cities, and he had heard about it and was familiar with it. And I said, you need to meet my friend Mark Lee Dixon. So I brought Mark into town, and Mark, Charles, and I sat down. We talked about this, and Charles is a very humble man, and he just said, I'm just going to go talk to Mayor Pope, and I'm going to say we should do this.
Mhm.
I'm going to let you take all the credit. He wasn't looking to take the credit. He was just saying, Mayor Pope, let's do this.
Yeah.
I'll support you in it.
Mhm.
I know we've been political rivals sometimes, but I'll support you in this, and I would like to see you do this and lead the way and get some credit for this. Even
Right.
not interested. That conversation
From the start.
happened. Yeah, from the
Not
beginning.
even so from the beginning, even just the basic conversation, Mayor Pope was disinterested in the idea, didn't really see, because it seemed to a lot of people like myself that were just watching it as it developed, and usually 3 weeks after it developed,
Mhm.
that it was like, as that was pursued, there are these issues here, and we're pro-life, but we just don't think this is legal. But would you say that that interpretation of their mindset holds true, or do you think they had a fundamental problem with it just from the start, like the ethics of passing it from the start?
Yeah, from the beginning, they're not pro-life. That's what it comes down to.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
That's what, see, because you hear people say things that say, no, he's a pro-life mayor, but I don't understand how you can call yourself pro-life if you don't stand
Yeah.
for life. So
Show me by your actions what you are.
exactly.
And that's what I say to politicians all the time. Right now, our Texas legislature is talking about this is the most conservative session ever. I said, prove it to me.
Yeah.
Show me by your actions that you're conservative in what you've done, because I don't believe it when politicians speak.
Okay, so Planned Parenthood, we know they're coming. Okay,
Mhm.
you guys find that out. That's a certainty. Fast track, maybe some of we might end up going back to some of these details. I'm hitting just some of the highlights of things that I've been curious about. So, because everything I heard was just sort of rumors through the grapevine. I really wasn't
Mhm.
connected with any of you guys. I just started realizing, man, this is a real thing. We've got to,
Right.
like, who do I talk to? How do I get involved? So I had heard that they had applied for an abortion license,
Mhm.
and that the whole idea, because I didn't even know the vote was taking place in Lubbock City Council until after it had been denied, right? Until they
Right.
had voted it down. And I found out a couple weeks after that.
Okay.
Okay, so that's when I first was like, even, how am I not down there talking in the mic and doing
Mhm.
what I can? Like, I was like, I need to. So anyway, I started losing my train of thought. So anyway, I became aware after the fact, right? So then I had heard a rumor that Planned Parenthood had applied for an abortions license, and that the voting, the petition had already been signed too. I didn't
Mhm.
even know that. The petition had already been signed, and pretty much I found out we were going to have a vote, but nobody really seemed to know immediately when that date of the vote was going to be. When I found out it was only like a couple months away, I started panicking, realizing I'd missed out on this whole thing. And I became very concerned that, man, there was so much going through my head, and I'm losing my train of thought, because it's a complicated chain of events. And I came into it. The rumor was that the date of the vote had gotten moved up to beat them at to try to have the ordinance in place before they got the abortion license.
Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
so let's start there. And then I found out that before the vote they had an abortions license, and so I was curious. Somebody had told me that if we were able to pass the sanctuary city ordinance before they got the license, it would make it easier to enforce. I wasn't
Mhm.
sure about that. And then once they had had that license, I guess a couple weeks prior to the vote, that it would be a more difficult fight afterward. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay?
So we started the petition process to force a citizen's vote. Well, first it would I can't talk. It would first force a vote of the council, and then if that vote failed, it would force a vote of the citizens.
Right.
We
Okay.
started that before Planned Parenthood had finished constructing their building,
Okay.
before they had applied for a license. And if Planned Parenthood is already killing babies, then they have standing to sue.
Why is that?
Because if they haven't killed babies yet, then the law doesn't change anything and doesn't grieve anybody.
Okay.
So,
But since they're entering into it lawfully and then it becomes illegal, now it somehow gives them some sort of weird platform to defend themselves. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, I mean, they have now become an injured party as far as the court is concerned.
Okay.
Where they can sue. Now, they can sue, but that doesn't mean that they actually have standing to sue, because the way this ordinance is written, the enforcement of it is not done by the city primarily. The enforcement is primarily done by people like you and I who may choose to sue Planned Parenthood over killing babies.
So let's talk about that for a brief second. So when it comes to the critiques online, where they've said that this is not going to be enforceable, that somehow they'll be protected by Roe v. Wade on a federal level, I see people talking about the city side of this, that if they tried to litigate, they would be allowed to, I guess, fine up to $2,000 per abortion after the ordinance is in effect. They say they'll never do that. So you've done nothing, right? But there's another side to this that I don't see people critiquing, which, and correct me if I'm wrong, gives immediate family members that disagree with the decision of that immediate family member receiving an abortion, it gives them a legal route of suing for wrongful death, and any immediate family member has the capability to do that, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So it's not just the city that would be responsible for enforcing fines for abortions. Immediate family members that disagree with the decision would also have the capability. So when you say it's in our hands to carry out that litigation, that's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so the city's enforcement part is there. It's called the public enforcement section. However, that's limited to after Roe v. Wade's overturned. The primary mechanism of enforcing this is right now, before Roe v. Wade's overturned, which I don't believe ever will be overturned.
Okay.
Because I believe that a non-constitutional opinion such as Roe v. Wade, it's just like the same thing as the old racist opinions of old. They'll never overturn it because the court will never admit they were wrong.
Right.
So I don't anticipate Roe v. Wade being overturned. I anticipate states like Texas standing up eventually.
So you're saying the city won't execute those fines unless Roe v. Wade is overturned?
Exactly.
I didn't see, and I hadn't heard anything about that. Okay, keep going.
So that's why the primary enforcement is in the lawsuits.
Okay.
Family members suing, or any citizen can sue as well. The family members have a little bit more ability to sue in what might be turned a harsher way than any random citizen can. But so it's primarily on the family members suing, but also could be you or I deciding to sue because we know of a specific case, and that's aggrieving us.
So another critique that I've seen, since we're talking about the fines, you and I are both Christian men, and we believe that a $2,000 fine or a lawsuit does not necessarily do justice to the murder of an innocent child, right? We understand that this isn't real justice, but as far as our capabilities are concerned, you have a much better understanding of the law and how to execute these policies and ordinances. Those that are critiquing, saying this isn't real justice, for instance, these radical abolitionists that seem to be at war with everybody versus abolitionists that, like us, that are still believe strategy has to be incremental. Some would say those two are oxymoronic together, but I think you and I would be on the same page with that. What would you say, though, to what we've done as actually and the larger debate of justice, what's allowed underneath the ordinance and enforcing it, and the larger conversation on justice for the unborn? How would you even approach that?
So ultimately, what the state of Texas and every other state should do is punish abortion as murder.
Right.
That means everybody involved with the abortion, the doctor, the nurse, the secretary, the mom, the dad, if assuming the dad's involved at least, the taxi driver, if that taxi driver is involved, is charged with murder or a accessory to murder charge. Every single one of them should be charged with murder.
Agreed.
Now, the state of Texas can do that right now. The state of Texas could ignore Roe versus Wade and do that, and that's what we as abolitionists believe. However, a city in Texas, at least, cannot pass an ordinance with any fine, with any penalty bigger than $2,000.
Okay. That's
the maximum penalty the state of Texas allows the city to do. So we picked the maximum, $2,000. That's what they can do. And we've also allowed tort law, civil suits to be as much as the court decides that they should be. So we've done the max we can do. I would love to see the city of Lubbock ban abortion, no exceptions, and charge the mother with murder, charge the doctor with murder. I would love to see that happen. It's just not legal.
It's not legal, and it's not practical. If you're trying to affect any sort of change immediately, you'd pretty much be doing nothing.
Yeah.
If you just approached it like that, right?
Yeah. And as abolitionists, when we say ignore Roe, we're not saying ignore the law. We're saying ignore an unconstitutional opinion that nullifies good law.
Right. What is unconstitutional about Roe v. Wade? Now, I have to tell you, this has never been something I've had to fight personally. I have lots of friends that have, but it's not something that I have personally spent a lot of time really educating myself on the history. My only understanding at the moment is that, and I've never read Roe v. Wade, I've never read the bill, But my understanding is that Roe v. Wade speaks to some sort of potential life, whereas we know now scientifically and biologically that this is 100% a human life from conception, right, to total birth. And so what I've understood from listening to guys like Jeff Durbin, in his group, is that Roe v. Wade is irrelevant because it doesn't speak to the facts that we understand now.
Absolutely.
So when you refer to it as unconstitutional, that's the only understanding I have of Roe v. Wade. Go ahead and please elaborate and educate me.
Sure. So our Constitution sets up separation of powers. You have the executive branch, president, legislative branch, Congress, and the judicial branch, the courts. And each one is given separate powers. Now, when we're in school, we're all taught, well, those three branches are co-equal branches, you might have heard in school. And I heard that in school, and I believed it in school. And then I actually read the Constitution. They're not co-equal. They have separate powers that are different. And the legislature actually has the most power, and the judicial branch has the least power. So here's the judicial branch in the Roe versus Wade, in many cases like this, where they decide, we're going to make law. We're going to decide that this law is unconstitutional, and our new law is that you cannot charge a woman with murder because all of a sudden got some thunder going on outside.
Yeah, we had great tornado action last night, didn't we?
Yeah.
Thunderstorms tonight.
So they just decided to make law. So it's unconstitutional for a court to make law.
Interesting. Okay.
It's unconstitutional for a court to try to nullify any law. So
you're saying that alone being unconstitutional would give a state government the ability to say, we don't recognize this.
Exactly. So we look through the Constitution and say, where does it say who decides what laws are unconstitutional and what laws are not unconstitutional? And the answer everyone's going to give is, well, the Supreme Court. And I'll say to people over and over, show me in the Constitution where the court's given that power.
Interesting.
And people always say, well, it's in there. I know it's in there. Well, I know you say that because your government teacher in high school or college told you that, but tell me, where is it? And they can never actually show it to you because it's not there.
It's almost like, and I talked about this a lot, but people tend to get stuck. I remember R.C. Sproul used to talk about this. He talked about the difference between ethics and morality. And morality is the study of what is, ethics are the study of what should be, and that most people govern and make decisions on, what they believe to be true or correct based on statistical morality, which is the more people say that this is the way it is, the more likely our modern culture is willing to accept it as fact, rather than looking at the ethical issues of what should be.
Right.
And so it seems like because the court went ahead and made a law, that's sort of set a new precedent where people are willing to argue that the courts can make law. So we kind of are back in that vein of the larger concept of statistical morality versus ethics. And really, the court should not be able to make law. It doesn't have the right to make law, and we shouldn't honor it if it tries to make a law. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay.
And so since the Constitution never says a court can make law or anybody else or nullify law by declaring it unconstitutional, we're left to say, well, who can then? Well, since the Constitution doesn't specify that, the 10th Amendment says it's left to the states and to the people.
Okay.
So who decides what's unconstitutional, what's constitutional? Texas and people like you and I.
Mm-hmm.
We, the people, decided this is not unconstitutional, even though our mayor said it was. And we voted overwhelmingly to say, let's pass this. Texas can nullify Roe v. Wade. They could pass a law tomorrow, say abortion's illegal in the state of Texas, and everyone should be charged with murder. That should happen. It won't, because we have cowards running our legislature.
Yeah.
And people don't understand how basic law works, and they're not willing to stand up for their branch.
Well, okay, so let me ask you this. Let's say, like I said, I'm a noob with this stuff. Mm-hmm. So is Roe v. Wade considered a federal law?
No.
Okay, so it's not even on the books. It's not even considered. What is it then? So because let me preface the question, because a lot of newbies and morons like myself, they're asking the same questions. I hear the argument, just using Lubbock as an example with Planned Parenthood. I've heard the argument from a lot of people that yelled at us with the signs. We were out there with signs for, weeks, and stuff. A lot of people wanted to engage. And it was pretty much that Planned Parenthood could ignore our city ordinance because federal law trumped it. Roe v. Wade, they were referring to Roe v. Wade as federal law trumped our city ordinance. Therefore, congratulations, you've done nothing. They still have federal protection. And I didn't know how to argue against that, but I didn't think that was true.
Sure.
So,
yeah. So a court opinion is not a law. It's just an opinion. And so if I were to sue you, we'd go before a court. I won't sue you because we're not supposed to sue brothers, right?
Right.
You know.
Hopefully we can work it out.
Right. But if I were to sue you, we'd go before a court, and the court would give an opinion as to what the law that we're differing over says, and how that law is to be enforced upon your alleged violation, and whether or not you did violate that law. That's how a court works. A court doesn't make law. So Roe v. Wade is not law.
It's not law.
The law is that, so in Texas, the law was that abortion is illegal, and sadly was not prosecuted in the way it should be. It wasn't murder. It was just some lesser crime with a lesser punishment, and the mom was not charged. Now, if it's murder, we recognize everyone involved is charged, and the punishment should be equal to what the punishment would be if somebody killed you. So they looked at that and said, well, the law is not recognizing it's murder. It's some lesser crime, and we just don't like that. So we're going to tell them it's nullified. And that's not law. Now, Joe Biden seems to understand this, of all people. Not a very smart man, but he seems to understand this. And he said he wants to, quote, codify Roe versus Wade. In other words, make Roe versus Wade into law. And to do that, he'd have to have a majority in all the legislative branches, and then he'd have to sign that law to codify it. Now, he doesn't have the votes for that right now.
So are we talking, is Roe v. Wade more like fiat law in nature
yeah.
only? I mean, it's just like, it's not, there is no hard currency with it, but we just all recognize it as such. And so we're just playing this freaking Monopoly game in the courts.
Yeah, exactly.
Just recognizing authority that was never there in the first place.
Yeah. And it really goes back even further. Marbury v. Madison was a very early court case. And I don't remember exactly all the details, but basically the executive branch and the legislative branch were having a dispute over powers. And the Supreme Court jumped in, sided with one of them, and said, we determine what's constitutional or not. That's unconstitutional. And therefore, I think it was the president sided with the judicial branch. So you had two branches against one, and the two branches won out, of course. And therefore, from that point on, the courts have assumed the power to declare unconstitutional.
Is that what we would call establishing a precedent?
Yeah.
Okay, so we established a new precedent, even if ethically it was unsound.
Exactly.
Okay, and so that leads me to another question about precedents. It has been explained to me that all of the cities in Texas, which I believe there are 20, Levelland happened last night, which is 20 miles from here. Is that does it make city 27?
So Levelland has to have one more vote.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it will be 27 once it does pass.
Okay, so in the attempt for sanctuary cities to spread, okay, where everybody's passing this ordinance, which I have questions about where that ordinance came from in the first place. Could that be part of a process of establishing a new precedent where, for instance, like Doug Wilson was talking to, I can't remember what his name was. They had a small little, very cordial conversation up in Moscow. There was sort of a debate that took place. He had written, the guy that did you see this conversation?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so I can't remember that he'd written a lot of legislation. He was working with the Idaho legislature. My friend Tom Dunn sent me the interview. So it was kind of a radical abolitionists versus abolitionists that work incrementally. It was just sort of that conversation. What are the differences? And one of the things that came up was that you got to make 7-yard plays to get the touchdown. Okay. Strategically, you don't want to say you can never play ideally, you'd like the touchdown, right? If you can run the 100-yard touchdown, that's great. Right? That happens, but very rarely. But most of the time, you have to think in terms of 7 and 10 yards, get the next first down, right?
Yeah.
You've got these goals. And it seems to me that if plays for that immediate touchdown are failing in some sense, and it seems to be a bad strategy, it doesn't seem to be inherently wrong to play that 7-yard play. And what I mean by that is, if we can't just get the state to acknowledge it as murder and just levy these laws and execute justice, right, for the deaths of these innocent unborn, by making 7-yard plays and establishing sanctuary cities all over Texas, in the nation for that matter, are we establishing a new precedent and changing the strategy that will be more effective as we move forward?
Yeah, I think so. Let me develop your football analogy a little further here.
Please. And I don't know a lot about football. I pretty much executed everything that I knew right there.
Funny. So I imagine in your analogy here that the state of Texas is the wide receiver. And here I'm the quarterback. I got the ball and I'm trying to throw them. They're wide open in the end zone for the 100-yard touchdown to ban abortion completely. And they can do that, but they're off looking at the crowd. They want to know what the crowd thinks about what they're about to do here.
Okay, which would be our legislature.
Yeah, so that's the legislature is the wide receiver.
Are you guys okay with this?
Yeah.
You know, we don't want.
Yeah, they don't want to offend anybody. They want to get reelected.
Only if it's going to be a popular decision.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they're looking at the crowd to see what to think, and therefore we can't throw them the ball because they're not open. They're not looking at it. They're open, but they're not looking at it. So instead, the rush is coming on, and we're saying, well, Planned Parenthood's coming to our town. Let's run a 5-yard dive and do what we can. And so in Lubbock, Texas, we can't just go ban abortion completely like we want to, but we did everything possible. This law was the furthest law that is legal in the state of Texas under state code that we can do. And I do believe it's going to completely keep Planned Parenthood out. And well, at least from killing babies. They can, I keep on saying, well, this is not an anti-Planned Parenthood ordinance per se. They're welcome to come in town and do good things like they always claim that they do. Now, I think you and I know better. They don't do good things.
No, they don't do good things. And, I had a friend the other day, we were talking about this just to highlight this. Because, something that Jim's, I believe, talking about is Planned Parenthood claims that it provides all these healthcare services to women that are of lower income status or whatever, and that they're vital for the success and health of women that can't afford healthcare. But in reality, every time you take abortion away as a service, they go under. Because abortion is the moneymaker. I mean, it's like if they can't survive without abortion, how many of these wonderful services are they really offering? So
yeah, and they do very little of those in the first place.
They do. Yeah,
it's all about abortion for them. That's what they are. So we'll be standing outside the abortion clinic here in Lubbock, and someone will claim, "Oh, I'm here for something else." Lately, in fact, I was out there today, and the lady said, "I'm just here for a breast exam." I didn't really believe her story in the first place. She was there during the abortion time, and
which our clinic, from what I understand, at least for a while, they could have changed it. They were only offering abortion. They had an abortionist that came in twice a month, and so they were scheduling them. So they didn't do abortions every day, but they scheduled them twice a month. Which I saw a bunch of ads recently. They were looking for new staff.
Yep.
After the ordinance passed, do you know if that caused some sort of disruption in their?
I'm assuming it did, but I don't really know.
Nobody really knows, right?
Yeah.
They're not our friends. They're not really just open for conversation.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna have them on the show here.
Yeah, they're probably not willing to come on. But
okay, so back to just more of the local conversation with Lubbock and what's happening here, because what I don't think some people know this, some people don't. So I'll just give you the fact: we're the 11th largest city in Texas. Is that correct? Okay. Lubbock is the 11th largest city in Texas. It's the 83rd or 84th largest city in the United States. Not only did we bypass our city council and take it to the people for a vote, and that succeeded, obviously, but we were the only city that's passed the ordinance. Not only the largest city to pass the ordinance, but the only city that passed the ordinance the way we did, and also the only city that passed the ordinance that has an active Planned Parenthood that's practicing abortion, right? So we were threefold firsts, right, for this ordinance. And so it was, despite the opposition from our own city council, a lot of people were concerned that the lawsuits were going to be a huge deal, right? And so if we're not careful, Lubbock's going to get sued by all these organizations, and they're not going to be able to defend them in court. And we know for a fact that the ACLU has filed a lawsuit. Did the ACLU file it on its own, or is Planned Parenthood filing it along with the ACLU?
Yeah, Planned Parenthood filed the lawsuit along with the ACLU to help them.
Okay.
That came down yesterday. Last night, I was sitting in the city level and city council meeting, and I started getting texts that there was a lawsuit filed. I'm not a lawyer, but I guess I know enough about law to laugh at their lawsuit.
They lost it once already, right? Did they have to drop a suit? This happened in one sanctuary city?
Kind of, sort of.
Okay.
So they sued 7 cities in East Texas, some of the first 7 to pass this ordinance.
7 of them?
Yeah.
At the same time, or individually?
All at the same time.
Oh, but individually?
Individually, but it was one conglomerate case.
Gotcha.
And that was over, they said that their free speech rights were violated because the ordinance called them a criminal organization. Well, they are, but that wasn't really necessary to the law. It was kind of just an extra tack on to say, hey, these guys are criminals. And so those 7 cities backed off on that particular line. They just had a new meeting and they removed that from their ordinance. And then the ACLU dropped the lawsuit. And so they never challenged it on the face of, can a city ban abortion? They never challenged it on that. Now they are. So they filed suit in Lubbock yesterday in federal court, which is the first laughable thing, because one of their arguments was, you can't ban abortion in Texas because that violates Texas state law. Well, if that's the case, why are you suing in federal court? Why did you sue in state court, which is the proper venue for that?
Right.
And I'll tell you the answer is because they know that they'll lose in state court. And in federal court, they have a little bit more of a chance, but I think they're in trouble still.
Okay.
Um,
So that's good news.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And now, when the sanctuary city or the strategy of passing sanctuary city ordinances, this is a question. This is a question I've had as people. It's not a question I've had as people have offered. Some more people seem to be in favor and excited that this has taken place. Right? It's rallied a lot of people. It's
Yeah.
gotten them excited. It's built this energy for doing, like, we can do something in our city rather than waiting for things to happen at the state level. But there has been groups of people that have been really radical in their criticism of it, right? And you've seen that. Your name came up a bunch. I saw on different threads, and people that were following this closely. But it seems to me that I'm trying to be careful here because I also don't want to get lost in the weeds. I don't want to start fights with people because I really have an appreciation for everybody that's very active in this fight.
Sure.
Anybody that's out there doing everything they can to, liberate unborn children from this scourge of abortion. I'm a big fan of working together.
Yeah.
But as far as our ordinance is concerned, it's now that we've passed it, is it possible that Planned Parenthood will move to other cities around us
Sure.
and just go ahead and try to avoid litigation here locally and just establish something maybe in a town 5 miles away or 2 miles away or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely possible. And the weakness of a city by city approach is that they can just move to the next city. The strength of it is that next city can also ban abortion. So one thing I'm doing now and calling upon the nearby cities, all the suburbs of Lubbock, to say, time for you to ban abortion too. Lubbock did it. What about you? Shallow-Water, Wolfforth, New Deal, Abernathy passed one nearby city. Abernathy just passed it, and Levelland's working on it, and we're working on Slayton. So there's lots of possibilities for them to just move down the street, but we're trying to stop them from that as well. And hopefully we'll be successful in every town nearby.
Yeah. So what does this look like going forward now? We've got a lawsuit. We're going to contest it. Obviously, who's contesting the lawsuit?
So they say the city of Lubbock, because the city of Lubbock's the one who has the ordinance on the books.
Okay. So what does that look like, though, if everybody that's involved in that didn't want it in the first place?
Yeah.
That's definitely are they actually going to do their job, or are they going to work against us in secret?
It's a good question. I'll take the mayor at face value until I hear otherwise, but he has said that we are going to vigorously defend this law. So I'll take him for his word at this point. I'm not very trusting of him because he's not a good man, but we'll allow him to prove himself, and hopefully they will. They hired a lawyer that is not the free lawyer that we had offered to them. I don't know this lawyer personally, but people who know him tell me that he'll do a good job.
Okay.
He is, the city's paying him, and frankly, the city should not be paying for something that they have the best lawyer around for free. Jonathan Mitchell, former Solicitor General, which means the number 2 lawyer in the state of Texas, and
offered his services for free.
Yeah. And I said the number 2 because the number 1 lawyer is the Attorney General. That's an elected position. Not necessarily a great lawyer, but he's the top lawyer in Texas. He hires his assistant is the Solicitor General. Usually that's the best lawyer that he can get to get that job. This is a guy who knows how to argue before the Supreme Court, has won before there. So he's the best possible case, and he's free. So why hire a local guy to do it? Well, it's because they didn't want to have to do what we told them to do all along. Which is ban abortion at the city council level and use Jonathan Mitchell to protect the city from them.
So it's still just sort of not wanting to acknowledge, not wanting to play ball with you guys.
Yeah.
Still to this level,
yeah.
Sort of in a petty way. So I had heard that there were a lot of lawyers, or at least some, I don't know about a lot, but willing to offer their services to people that did want to sue Planned Parenthood. Is that correct?
Yes.
So just in case anybody in Lubbock ends up watching this, because Lubbock's going to be in the title, if you've had an immediate family member that had an abortion and you would like to sue Planned Parenthood, how would they go about that?
Yeah.
Because isn't that part of the process, is getting
Mhm.
the word out that
Yeah.
this is where the teeth on the ordinance are. People need to know that they have this option, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I mean, I, I would say if you are in a situation where a family member has murdered a baby, then let us know and we'll try to connect you to the lawyers. You can email me at westtexas4for life@gmail.com, and I'll put you in contact with those lawyers.
So, and I would guess that the purpose that the ordinance being passed, obviously the goal is not necessarily just to be able to sue, but the whole purpose of suing and the possibilities of all the lawsuits that are possibly there that
Mhm.
Planned Parenthood would have to deal with would be to either over encumber their capabilities with lawsuits,
Mhm.
forcing their doors to shut, right?
Right, right.
Putting added pressure on them, knowing that there is continued added liability with each abortion that
Mhm.
is executed. Uh, I think the goal of the sanctuary city ordinance, correct me if I'm wrong, this has been my interpretation of events, is passing something that makes it so difficult for Planned Parenthood to operate under the threat of potential liability that they're forced to shut down and leave.
Yeah, exactly. We want them to stop killing babies.
So for those out there, and this is a route I was going a second ago, and then I didn't quite want to go there because I didn't know how to say it, but for all the criticism that's been offered that this isn't going to do anything, I would say since 2012, Planned Parenthood has had to close like close to half of its locations. It's had plenty of issues. We're continuing to add pressure with this ordinance in a way that makes it more difficult for them to do business. And although we know it doesn't actually provide actual justice, if you're not capable of bringing actual justice to bear, the next best thing is to just keep them out of your city. And if you can't do that at a state level, but you get involved on a city level with people that are willing to pick up the fight, like you, thank God you were there from the start, because I certainly wasn't. You know, you were neck deep in the fight before I was even aware it was happening. You know, you've already set things in motion that could very well lead to Planned Parenthood having to leave Lubbock very soon, which I don't know what else. I don't understand why there are those out there that say that this did not save a single baby. I saw comments like, congratulations, you guys have done nothing. If Planned Parenthood is forced to shut its doors and leave, we obviously haven't solved the larger issue of abortion, but thank God it's blood guilt's not just raining down on the city of Lubbock. You know what I
Right,
mean? Like
right.
what are you supposed what are people supposed to do? You know, I mean, I feel like this is what you guys have done is commendable. It's been blessed by God. It is absolutely something everybody should get behind. And as long as we continue to get the word out, hopefully, I mean, the goal is that Planned Parenthood packs its bags and gets out of Lubbock.
Right. We would love that.
We would so all of these other places that have passed the ordinance, do you think once so now that for instance, all the other cities that have passed this ordinance in other places around Texas and surrounding communities around Lubbock, that effectively would prevent once it's been passed. You don't think Planned Parenthood would even try to set up a shop in a place like that, right?
No.
It would
And in
be
fact, the ACLU even stated that this ordinance makes it impossible for an abortion clinic to move into town.
okay, perfect. So it's
Yeah.
not just so right now they've got a grievance against us because they were here prior to the ordinance. But if other cities are able to establish the ordinance, make it law, then there's no way that Planned Parenthood could even begin to think about setting up a facility there.
Exactly.
Is that why so many, you know, and I don't know who, and I don't want to know who, and obviously don't want to give strategies or plans or planning away. I'm not asking for any of that information, but I've heard rumors that there are lots of cities right now that are actively pursuing this, and there would effectively, I can't think of a place that would be an option for them to move to as many, you know, if all these places end up, you know, passing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is that
There's
fair?
a lot of cities that are thinking about it and talking about it. And
Is Mark over encumbered with emails right now? People want
Mark is way over encumbered. And I've told Mark, I said, you need to replicate yourself. You need to have, you run East Texas, and our team out here in Lubbock now can run West Texas, and get somebody in Nebraska, because there's a big movement in Nebraska wanted to pass this now.
Where did the ordinance come from? That's something I don't want to forget to ask.
Yeah.
I meant to ask earlier on. Okay, so Charles Perry said, "Yeah, I'm going to help you with that." But I heard when somebody said Charles Perry was helping with the ordinance. I thought it was like a brainchild of people within state government that were trying to help cities get it passed, and that it was written somewhere at a higher level. Where did this come from?
So 2 years ago, Senate Bill 22 passed. It was a pro-life bill that said that cities and local governments cannot spend any taxpayer money on abortion. So it gave all these laundry lists of things that they cannot do. And then State Representative Jonathan Stickland, a guy from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, threw in a little amendment at the very end that said, nothing in this ordinance prohibits a city or county from banning abortion in their jurisdiction. Just a tiny little amendment thrown on there, and that amendment lit a firestorm, because that's what gave Mark Lee Dixon the idea to do this ordinance and to write this ordinance up and have some lawyers help him out and pass it in Wascom. And here we are, 20 some cities later, and it's going to be a movement that sweeps through the country now.
So, just to give some facts for those that are interested in this, I originally got involved with Project. I met Paul Stell, right, and I jumped on just to see like where can I help? Like, where do you guys? Where do you need somebody to do whatever? I'll stamp papers and lick envelopes or whatever. Like, what do you guys need? And in the process, I just ended up meeting more people, and I ended up finding out that, through Project Destiny, I believe, correct me if any of these facts are wrong, we'd raised somewhere right around $120,000. And for the sake of argument, Planned Parenthood had about the propaganda machine on that end at about $120,000. So it was they had a little, like 1,000 and some change more than we did or something.
So
right.
So the most recent report, which is 8 days before the election.
Okay.
So that's April 23rd. The Project Destiny package raised $130,000.
Okay.
Planned Parenthood had raised $411,000.
Oh, I didn't see those numbers.
Yeah.
I saw 119,000 and some change and 121,000 and some change, and I'd seen that like 99% of their funds had come from other Planned Parenthoods, mainly the one out of New York, the Planned Parenthood Federation, the National Federation. They contributed $50,000. So. Those were the last numbers I saw. Where did this number 400,000 come from?
Yeah, so it's more big donations from other Planned Parenthoods, from ACLU.
Okay.
Planned Parenthood of Orange County gave $50,000.
Okay.
Planned Parenthood of Greater Texas, which is the Dallas-based.
That's what they had to work with prior to the vote. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
So as of 8 days before the vote, they had raised 411,000, I believe is the number.
Okay.
And I'm sure they raised more in that final 8 days as well.
That's even more incredible to me.
Yeah.
Did they spend that much money?
We haven't got their final spending report, but by the look of the media that they bought, they blanketed the airwaves.
Okay, so they blanketed the airwaves. I see. I don't watch regular television. So are you talking about like local ads on local news stations and stuff? They have propaganda pieces?
Propaganda pieces, lying about the ordinance, telling people every, false thing. They wanted everybody to be very scared of this ordinance. And they put a lot of money down to do that. I do home health for a living. Okay. So I'm a physical therapist. I go into people's houses. I'm at patients' houses, and they have their TV on in the background while we're doing our therapy. And constantly I'm hearing commercials for Planned Parenthood, because I'm with you. I don't really watch TV either.
Yeah.
But constantly I'm hearing commercials. And I'm just kind of looking around like,
paying attention.
Yeah. And, there's lies. But they spent so much money. And I drive around a lot, so I listen to the radio a lot, and constantly on the radio.
I didn't hear that either. If it's not on Spotify. I don't. So that's interesting. So I don't want to keep you forever, so we'll kind of start to wrap it up, but I do have a few more questions. Sure. So that was something. Who was it that I kept talking? No, I guess it was you. You kept saying that. You kept saying the disparity. Okay, we had way more pro-life signs all over town, and people were asking, taking pictures of the vote no signs to the ordinance. If you were for the ordinance, I told people, if you're for life, vote for the ordinance. Yes. That's what we were telling everybody, right? Just remember, because sometimes legalese can be confusing if everybody's just reading this on the ballot. So understand, vote for it. It doesn't matter what you think it's saying, vote for the ordinance. I had friends say, I'm against abortion and I voted against the ordinance just to mess with me. So it's very easy, flip that. But you kept mentioning, don't judge the closeness of this race by the disparity that we see in the signs, right? So there were a lot less vote no signs than there were vote for the ordinance signs. And that is, when I started paying attention to the signs that they had available, they were pretty much accusing, they were saying, vote no for the ordinance for our taxes, right? They made the taxes the argument. It was vote no for healthcare and your taxes, right? And a lot of people were asking, just what did they mean by that? I'm asking you, what did they mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, they were basically saying that we're going to get sued. It's going to cost millions of dollars to defend the lawsuit.
Okay, so they were worried about lawsuits costing the city money. Okay, so protect your taxes there. But was that primarily it?
That's it. Yeah.
See, I had heard some people use the argument, because some people would argue, those signs without even knowing who put it there or why.
Mhm.
And, some of the arguments I ran into personally was save your tax dollars by keeping unwanted children from being stuck in the system.
I mean, I suppose as a
Now, I don't know if that's the official line, but
Yeah.
people were personally arguing the talking points on that sign
Mhm.
because it wasn't elaborated on the sign. You got this much space to convey a message, so it's very simple. But the way people interpreted how to protect our taxes, it was interesting to see the difference. And I didn't know what was being officially said by the propaganda machine that was making them. But
Yeah. See, and I never heard that argument actually about the burden on society with tax dollars and all that.
Yeah.
I never heard that argument. I'm sure it was said. But
more mouths to feed, right?
Yeah.
So more, but it's still, how horrible is that? You might as well have a sign that says "Kill the poor children."
right.
And in the meantime, I'm sitting there, and I actually I started frustrating some people because the immigrant crisis was at its height in the media,
Mhm.
and they were pretty much saying, the the people that I was talking, they were fine with killing babies, but let's let all the immigrants in. So I flipped it to argue from absurdity, and I said, let's save the children and kill the immigrants. Now, that's not a real argument I had, but as you argue from a place of absurdity, it was one of those quick, you flip the argument on its head and you take that juxtaposition and it forced them into this weird place,
Mhm.
And so that was, I knew it wouldn't do you any service if I started making t-shirts, save the kids,
Right.
kill the immigrants.
Yeah, that wouldn't help. Yeah, that
But
wouldn't help.
in my own way, I tried to get out there and stir the pot a little bit with some of these
Mhm.
lunatics protecting the sign. So
Yeah.
we know that they lied, right? They put the local news station on there was a PR place out of Austin that tried to act like a local news station was fully in favor, supporting the vote against the ordinance, right?
Right.
Is that proven true?
Yeah, they did that, and they actually the local news channel issued a cease and desist letter,
Okay.
and they had to say we won't do this again, otherwise they were gonna get sued.
So they had a lot more money and they were incredibly dishonest with it.
Yeah, and they still only got 32% of the vote,
Oh, 30, that's what, yeah. And
or 37% of the vote. That's
so it was like
yeah.
62 point something to 37 point something
Yep.
in the end. So Lubbock won 62%. Just give the raw numbers out from what I remember. Less than half of Lubbock is registered to vote. Only a quarter, it was like 22% of
Yeah.
registered voters actually turned out to vote.
So there are 145,000 registered voters in the city of Lubbock,
Okay.
with a population of 264, I believe, is the current estimate.
Okay.
So quite a bit over 50%.
That's city. There
Yeah.
were a lot of 300,000 numbers. That's county, but city is
county, yeah.
200 and something.
Yeah. So the turnout was actually quite high. It was the second highest turnout ever in a non-presidential year.
Since we voted for alcohol
Yeah.
in city limits, which,
Yeah.
leave it to people to vote for their vices.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, I was not living in Lubbock at that time when they had an alcohol election. Lubbock used to be a dry city,
Mhm.
and fairly recently, actually, it was crazy for a college town to be a dry city.
We had a little Vegas out off the interstate, man.
Yeah, they called it the Strip, and
That's where you
so-
went to get beer.
I never did. But it was all happened before I moved here. But they had a big vote, and a lot of the churches mobilized against alcohol in the city limits, and a lot of people who wanted to drink mobilized for it, and it was a very contentious election and very close too.
Yeah, I still have mixed emotions about it. I do like a good bourbon or a good scotch, and I am glad I don't have to drive all the way out to the
Sure.
interstate to get it, but I think I'm just completely fine leaving it out on the strip.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's another conversation.
Right,
But yeah,
right.
we had massive turnout. Not since voting for alcohol next door did so many people turn out. Is
Yeah,
essentially what it
exactly.
was. People wanted to be able to get beer at 7-Eleven, and so everybody in Lubbock turned out to vote.
Mhm.
And this was the second highest election, especially for early voting and all of that.
And
So-
along that lines, the local newspaper, which is quite liberal, actually did a little news story about this was a very young turnout.
It's because nobody writes for it anymore. They just import all their stories.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But yeah, so turnout was very young and very more female and more young.
Yeah.
Yet we had a landslide election for
landslide.
life. And
Ye-
we always get told that, well, women are pro-choice, they say, and only the men who want to control women are pro-life. Well, no, that's not the case at all. In fact, throughout this battle, all the attacks on me were coming from men, white liberal men, almost always.
Mm.
There was only one person I ever talked to who was
we call those beta males.
yeah. So
Well, in my experience, and I told some of you guys the story. It was funny to me how many white dudes riding passenger in vehicles were flipping us off and yelling at us.
Mhm.
And I made the joke to Paul. Paul, I guess, thought this was pretty funny. I was like, he said, how many people have been antagonistic? I said, well, the people that have just been younger white males
Mhm.
flipping us out, yelling and screaming. There were some women, but it was a lot of dudes. And I was like, but the funny thing was they were all riding passenger.
Mhm.
And I was like, so I don't know if it counts. If a man's not man enough to drive his woman somewhere, I don't know that I care what he thinks.
Right?
You know, that's the thing in my house. And nothing to the men that allow their wife to drive sometimes, but it's just, I don't know. I laugh sometimes as men were yelling out the passenger side. It's like, dude, if you can't even drive your woman through the city, like, I don't care what you have to say.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and we just come from a different world. But we had a lot of women. There were women yelling, you don't have a uterus. And so I pointed all the women around us holding signs that
Right,
did.
yeah.
I'm like, well, I hope
They do,
does their
yeah.
vote count? You know? So anyway, but yeah, thanks for all your hard work, man. I was privileged to just even in a small way, even participate. You know, we had a lot of people know the story, uphill battle. My own church didn't want to do anything with it, which I've never named, and I'm not looking to throw them under the bus, but had major problem. Most of the churches turned out and did their job. It
Yeah,
seemed like there was
200 churches.
200 churches show, and that was what Project Destiny was. That's who I was involved with, getting out, talking to pastors, talking with elders, getting the church to notify their church congregants so that the church would turn out to vote. And the idea was, let's get more of our people out to vote than their people, which is always the case in any election, right? That's the basic election strategy. And we did that in droves, and we wouldn't have been able to if guys like you and Paul and everybody else hadn't put in all the hard work prior to. And it was just a real privilege to even play a small part in that. So thank you for all
Well,
that.
and I throughout this victory season, I've been saying constantly, the victory is won by the pastors
Yeah.
who actually rose up and did what they're called to do.
Mhm.
And I was skeptical whether they would, to be honest.
Yeah. Well,
And,
this day and age, it's not easy to tell.
I mean, frankly, my opinion of most pastors is they're a bunch of wusses
Yeah.
who just want to make sure that their tithes come in and they don't care about their congregation otherwise.
No spines.
However, I was proven wrong, and I was thrilled to be wrong.
Yeah, a lot of churches that stepped up to the plate. There were churches that were leading it that I just didn't expect would, and all of a sudden you're just like, wow. I'm like, well, I ended up standing elbow to elbow with people I just didn't expect to be hanging out with.
Oh, I know.
Clapping the entire time.
Well, it's funny how peer pressure works, because peer pressure is often considered negative.
Yeah.
But it can be positive too.
Yeah, that's true.
We had cases where a pastor maybe who wasn't initially wanting to help out was calling Paul or I and saying, I need a yard sign in front of my church building to say vote for life. And I'm like, yes, sir, we're happy to get you one. But I need one.
Yeah, I need one.
And I think it came down to that church next to me's got one, and I look bad because I don't have one.
Well,
and my congregation's calling and saying, what's going on? Aren't you pro-life?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and like I said, some of you know the story, but there were 2 churches in town that really didn't want anything to do with anything related to this. And so strategically, there was one corner where people could hold signs and target all church traffic at all services in waves and fluctuations, and just exercise our rights as private citizens without violating anybody's private property rights. So Protestant theory of resistance was executed, I believe, in a very biblical fashion. And even some of the churches that didn't want anything to do with it, well, they got signs in a legal way anyway, and we got to engage a lot of the traffic headed in and out of church and make their congregants aware anyway. And so it was an interesting couple months, man.
Yeah.
It was, to say the least.
Yeah.
Anyway, guys, that's the story. If you got comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. If they're good questions, I'll just send them to Jim. I'll email him or something. And maybe if there are enough questions or people want to know more about this, maybe we'll just do another show in the future or something. So I hope you guys enjoy it. For those that have been following this, I mean, we made national headlines, and there's just international headlines. Yeah, absolutely. There are not a lot of people talking about this and anything other than a rumor, including myself. I had questions, obviously. And so I just decided, Jim lives in my city. We made history here. Jim was a forefront in history. And so I just thought it'd be cooler to just, instead of doing these Vimeo things like we normally do, just have them in the Through the Black office and just get into it. So I can't think of anything more important than saving the lives of innocent unborn children. And if there's anything happening in your area that you could be a part of, right? Anything. And not everybody's called to lead the charge, but listen to this conversation, do what you will, but if there's any way you're living in Houston or any of these, Austin or Dallas or whatever, any of these other areas that have Planned Parenthoods, at least in Texas, you know, feel free, reach out, find people that are out there, do something, stand there, hold a sign. You don't have to necessarily street preach, but get active, because this is more heinous than anything else that's happened in this country, and the blood guilt over the nation as a result of the loss of all of these millions and tens of millions and 20s of millions of children that have just been lost to narcissism and the altar of self. There shouldn't be a single Christian that's willing to sit on their butt and do nothing about it, right? The scripture calls us to preach the lordship of Jesus Christ, and with that comes thou shalt not murder. And I can't think of anything else we should be doing right now that would be more important than saving the lives of innocent children. And then pushing for stronger legislation that actually is capable of executing justice for those that do murder their children. That's what it is. It's murder. And there'll never be a time in my life where I call it anything but murder. It's murder. It should be treated like murder. And I don't think anybody, Jim and I, we're of the same mind here. Nobody wants to see it treated as anything other than murder, but you do what you can, man. You do what God gives you to steward. You do everything you can. And this obviously isn't the win. This is not the win. This is a step in the road. Nobody's like done here. It's just, if we can keep Planned Parenthood, I love it. Great. Move on to the next thing, right? Yep. Next thing. Game's not over.
Nope.
It's just starting.
More fight to happen.
Awesome, guys. Yep. Thanks for hanging out. It's going to be on 2 channels, Through the Black and Jared 2.0. So wherever you're seeing it, thanks for hanging out with me and Jim tonight. Peace.